Okay, thank you very much. Mike, sounds good. All right. So I'm a senior community evangelist, and what that really means is I'm a hybrid between a project manager and a community manager, and I do whatever else Red Hat needs me to do. So that's always been fun. In about 2 weeks, I'll be there for 13 years, so it's been a great ride, and I love what I do. Before we get too much into it, we mentioned, I did write a book called The Foundation for an Open Source City, so I'm really passionate about open government and open data. I will not be talking about that today, but if you want to talk to me afterwards about it, we can talk all night. So a little bit of housekeeping. I've got our Twitter handles on the top, so I'm at Hibbets. OpenSource.com is open source way. So if you have, if you're not following us and you want a good steady stream of open source deliciousness, I highly recommend following our feed. We highlight not only our content but other open source news and things happening out in the world. And then if you have a question during the presentation, I'll have some time for that. But if you want to tweet some questions or some thoughts during the presentation, feel free to do that as well. And then I will. I prefer to take most of my questions at the end, but if we get to a point and we have some questions in the interim, I'll stop for a few places to do that so we can get those steered away. So what I'm going to talk about today is really how we've built a community around a publishing platform, OpenSource.com. And for us, I often describe OpenSource.com as a publication and a community, because we can publish all day long, but if nobody's reading it and no one's contributing to it, then what do we really have? And what I'm hoping to accomplish today is to really share some of the insights that my team has learned, some of the methodologies that we use, some of the programs we put together, and some of the strategy we use, and finally some of the tools that we use to actually accomplish what we do every day. I'm hoping by sharing that you can take that back to your day jobs and improve that and make your teams better on an everyday, what you do every day. So again, OpenSource.com is an online publication and community, and we started this 6 years ago to basically create some thought leadership in open source. And this is a community project. So if you've been there before or if you're going to visit soon, you'll find out very fast that we don't talk a lot about Red Hat products. In fact, we don't talk about Red Hat products at all. We can talk about Red Hat communities and Red Hat upstream projects, but this is an open source community, and so our preference is to highlight open source and be the good community steward that we should. We've been doing that since 2010, so in fact next week we actually will celebrate our 6-year anniversary. It's like kind of a tattoo that I don't have. On January 25th, 2010 is when we launched it. I was there that morning. We removed the HT access, and the rest is history. So we'll, again, I will share a lot of the tools and techniques we've used to get from there to here. How we approach that, bless you, the way we approach it is by publishing content. And we have kind of 2 streams of content. I'll get to that in a moment. But we're publishing about 20 articles a week. And the majority of those articles are original content. So I'd estimate about 96% of the content we publish is original. We do tend to find some articles out there that we would syndicate in and republish, but our preference is to have unique content. We're averaging about 800,000 page views a month. So I don't know how people can grok the page view thing, because I kind of live in that world. But if you have your own little personal WordPress blog and you're getting 80 hits a month, which is awesome, we're getting 800,000, which is a lot of eyeballs and a lot of people interested in open source. So our mission is really to build the world's premier open source storytelling platform, and we do that through a number of ways. Right, so we kind of see ourselves as a catalyst for open source communities and to help them tell their story and to help them elevate their project and drive some awareness to their project. So we do that by collecting stories, and I'll get a little bit more into the details of how we do that. But one of the things I find that a lot of people don't know about particularly our team, is that we provide editorial services for people. So if you have a story to tell, I have editors on staff that can help you take your idea from an outline to an article. If English isn't your first language, we can help you improve your writing. And so we just got a whole team of people, a whole team of 5 people, that can help you refine your story, to help you get your article ready, to maximize it for search engine optimization, to give it a good title. And so we've got a bunch of people that have been doing this for a number of years, and we want to help tell your story. So we do that by 2 main ways. One, we kind of have our daily feed, right? So we have 3 or 4 new articles a day, again 20 a week, and that's we're not doing breaking news. We're not some news organization that's, hey, this thing just happened, we're going to do that. That's not what we do. We tend to focus more on the story side of things. And then the other part that we do is we call them resources. I'll also interchangeably call them evergreen content. So we're creating pages like what is Linux, or what is open source, what is OpenStack, something that we can have some source matter expertise in, or find someone in the community that can help us write that. Top 5 open source project management tools out there. So we know that people are out there looking for this type of content, and so we're producing that kind of content with our source matter experts. So a quick story I want to tell here is about a project called, I think it's pronounced B-Code, B-I-I Code. It's a dependency management project. So they came to us, it was literally about this time last year. They pitched us a story, said, hey, we've got this, we have this project called B-Code, and our investors, their plan is to release the source code and make our project open source once we hit 10,000 users. And so they pitched it to us, and we said, hey, that sounds like a really good story. And then, so we ran that story last January. And then in April of that year, they sent us this chart, this graph, and they said, hey, look, you can kind of see the arrow indicates when we published the story, and you can see that their user adoption rate definitely had a steady increase. So while we can't guarantee this same result for every open source project, we can see that for this community, by publishing and sharing their story, they increased their user adoption rate. Their investors saw this as an opportunity and they actually open sourced the project before they hit 10,000 users. So this was a really great kind of success story for not only us, but more so for them. I'll take a step back really quick and talk about kind of the open source development model and what we tend to focus on. And so there's kind of 6 tenets of the open source development model that we like a lot. And we talk about transparency, collaboration, participation, rapid prototyping, meritocracy, and passion. And we kind of bundle all this terminology into something we call the open source way. So how we view it is we've taken the core components that have made developing software in an open fashion and applied that to a philosophy which we call the open source way. And so the original intention of opensource.com was to highlight how open source is being used beyond technology, but we still talk about technology because that's what we all know and love about open source, and that's usually why most of us are involved. And if we kind of go through, I won't go through each of these, but we know that by being transparent with our open source communities, that creates a level of accountability. We know that with participation, we can get more eyes on the projects and generate more ideas. And if you were in the keynote yesterday with Cory Doctorow, he said no one ever argued that with less eyes, all bugs are shallow, right? So we've got that piece of it going. And then I talk a lot about passion because I think this is why most people are involved in open source in the first place. A lot of us are familiar with the terminology of scratching your own itch, right? So why do we even get involved in the first place, right? We have a problem we want to solve, and we think that there's other people out there that have a similar problem. So why don't we work on it together, and why don't we work on it in an open fashion? And we know that in an open fashion, by having our source code available and being transparent, that allows us to be more collaborative. It allows more people to participate, and of course, we've got governance with meritocracy. And in the coding world, right? That's the best code wins. In the kind of philosophical sense, that's the best ideas rise to the top, and we try to foster those best ideas. So I want to briefly introduce you to my team, all 5 of us. So on the main picture here, you've got myself, you've got Jen White-Huger. She's our content manager. She basically touches every piece of content that gets published. She manages our publishing calendar and does a lot of coordination with our writers. Then we have Alex Sanchez. Alex runs all of our social media and also does a lot of our content distribution. I'll talk a little bit about how we do that. Then we've got Ricky Ensley. Ricky usually attends Scale, however, she was not able to come this year, so she'll be back next year better and stronger than ever. She's a community manager along with myself and also helps manage a lot of our columnists who are repeat writers for us. We have Jason Baker. He does a lot of our SEO work and a lot of our the resource pages that I told you about earlier. And then we have Brian in here in the tan visor in one of the pictures. He's helping us build some community around the open organization, which is a book that our CEO of Red Hat, Jim Whitehurst, wrote last year about his leadership transition from being the CEO of Delta Airlines to being the CEO of Red Hat. And we took that as an opportunity to talk about open leadership and expand our kind of publication efforts here. So overall, I tend to think that we operate like a very well-oiled machine within Red Hat, and we actually operate kind of like a startup within Red Hat. So we're very nimble, we're very quick, we're able to make our own decisions, and we have the comfort of being a startup within a company, so we've got that link back to the mothership, so we don't have to worry about some of the other startup things that other normal companies would have to worry about, like getting funding and stuff. So I want to talk a little bit about the methodology of how I built the team here. So first of all, when I hire people, I'm looking for a couple things. First, I'm making sure that they have the right skill set that they can do the job. Of course, we can train people and do that sort of thing, but I want to make sure they have a base level of knowledge in order to get the job done. Right? If I'm hiring a social media person, I want to make sure that they have some social media experience. Like the first thing I'm going to do is see if you're on Twitter, Facebook, Google+, and make sure you're actually active there. I'm also looking for people that have life experiences. So, that's kind of in HR world, that's probably not the best thing to do, but I want to make sure that people have some experience in what they're doing, and make sure they have a good kind of diverse view of life and so forth. Probably one of the most important things is to make sure they're a culture fit. Red Hat has a very unique culture, and we're a very fast-paced, driven company and mission-based company. And if people, I often refer to it as a kind of a sink or swim. You either come to Red Hat and you're a really good swimmer, or you sink really fast and you don't last very long. So, and it's just kind of like, it's part of being in the tech industry. We could be working on one thing today, and that would change tomorrow. And if you don't survive in that kind of environment, then you're not going to be a very good part of the team. And the last thing I look for is to make sure they have an entrepreneurial spirit. So one of my favorite interview questions is, if you had unlimited resources and you could start a business today, what would you do? And I get some really interesting answers. But what I'm really looking for is to make sure that they have some sort of passion, that if they didn't have their day job getting paid for, that they would want to do something else and have the passion in order to do that. So one of the favorite books that I like to talk about is The Lean Startup. It's a book by Eric Ries, and he talks basically kind of, I've highlighted the things that I like about the book, the decision-making part of it, and creating feedback loops. And he has this concept called minimum viable product that he calls the MVP. So, and I'm going to give you a few examples, but in concept, right, you want to get something, whether it's code, project, or whatever it is, you want to get something in front of your potential customers or potential clients so that they can react to it, and you can gather feedback and then build that into the next version of the product, right? This is totally like a rip off the open source model of rapid prototyping, where we're putting out code on a daily basis, whether that's rawhide and whatever your release cycle is, so that you can get immediate feedback and get immediate reaction to it. So think that, but applied to maybe a startup model. And the other thing that I'm really keen on is that we measure everything we do on my team. So if we're going to try something new, we want to have a concept of like, what does success look like? Because if we get to a point and we've done something and it's not successful, we have to be able to kill it, and we have to be able to move on to the next thing, because I've got a list of like 50 things that we could be doing, but I don't have enough time or resources or people to actually execute on it, so we've got to make some really smart decisions about that. So I'll walk you through a few examples. The first one is our community calendar that we have on the site. This started out as a static HTML page that we were populating by hand with different events, and our initial goal was, could we get 30 different events contributed from the community within a month? We got 50 events that first month, and we decided to actually invest some development resources into making this more than just a static HTML page. We actually have a submission form, and it's a little bit more automated, and it kind of looks like this. We're actually looking to revamp this now because it is so popular, and there's so many different open source events happening that we want to make this even better for our community. So we've seen a lot of usage here. But the point is, we tried something out, we got a good reaction, and then we decided to invest more time and resources into it. Another example is our weekly top 5. So the problem we were trying to solve was, hey, we've got some great content, but how do we deliver it in a different fashion? And so we thought about, like, how do we tell people on YouTube that we've got really good content? So we decided to try this thing out called the weekly top 5. So every Friday, we publish a 2 to 3 minute video that talks about our top 5 articles from the week. Our initial goal was, can we get 100 page views for 3 weeks in a row? And so 100 page views on a YouTube video is actually pretty good. If you look, like, most YouTube videos have somewhere between 50 and 100, so we kind of put ourselves on the upper side of that stat. And we actually average about 200 to 300 page views a week on our videos. We went from This taking us probably about an hour and a half to produce, right? So prepping the content, getting the script ready, editing, and I think we got it now down to about 30 to 40 minutes. So we've got some efficiency in it, and it's just become part of our daily routine. So this was us willing to try something new, being able to measure what success looks like, and now it's part of our weekly thing. So it's basically the Reader's Digest version of opensource.com. Every Friday you can tune in and see what the top 5 is. Okay. The other part of methodology that's really interesting is this concept called ROWE, which is Results-Only Work Environment. So this was really popular a few years ago. I think Best Buy made it really popular, corporate Best Buy to be clear, where on the very extreme of this concept of results-only work environment is we don't care where you're at, what you're doing, how you do it, or when you get it done, but as long as you're meeting your objective, that's all we really care about. So we use a modified version of this, and we add some other things into it. So we have a flexible work environment, meaning like I don't expect my team to clock in at 9 and clock out at 5. We're very flexible. Like I don't usually show up to work until like 10 in the morning and in the office. Now I'm not saying that I'm usually working from home before that, but my kind of core hours are 10 to 6, where someone else's might be 9:30 to 5:30, and so we kind of know each other's schedules. And then the other thing that's really important is our 30, 60, 90 goal setting. So we sit down as a team and we map out our goals every 30, 60, and 90 days. We are a corporate company, so we kind of live in quarters. And our quarters actually don't match up to the calendar quarter, so that makes it really confusing. But every week on Tuesday, we have a meeting at 3:30, and we sit down and we review our 30, 60, 90. We look at our current goals. We make any modifications, and we add new goals that we need to. And so this is an opportunity for our entire team to kind of get together and see what's going on, and also for us to hold each other accountable on what we're working on. So a couple examples of this. This is really helpful when you have like larger projects that you need to get done, right? Because we can all get caught up what we call the whirlwind, right? Email, social media, just things that take up time, unplanned work that you don't like. That's not going to get your 3 big things that you need to get done that week. So as an example, last year I had a project to migrate opensource.com from a single instance on AWS to Acquia Cloud, which is our service provider for our Drupal system. And so, like, that was a pretty big project. Like, if I didn't have that on 30 to 60, 90, I could be like, oh, I'm just going to do that next month. Oh, and then I'm just going to do that next month. And it would have never gotten done unless we had our check-in points and unless we had things going. So that was a really helpful mechanism for us to kind of go through and say, hey, look, we've got this migration. Here's the plan. Here's how we're going to do it. And then to give a brief example of our flexible work schedule, we have a dedicated work from home day every week. So every Wednesday, my team does work from home, and so it gives us a really great opportunity to have a day with no meetings, and a day where we can work on some of those larger projects that we actually can get done. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the strategy. And I use this term called GSD, get stuff done, and we are really big fans of getting stuff done because we have a lot of things to do on the site. We have a lot of like little things that need to happen every day. So before I get too down the strategy road, I just want to take a pause here for questions and see if there's anything that I can address right now before we get into the weeds. Yeah. So the question was, we have a work from home day, and are we actively looking for ways to reduce meetings? For me personally, yes. I think my team probably isn't as in many meetings as I am. Because I've been at Red Hat for so long, I get involved with other little side projects and pulled into other things. So I am constantly looking for ways to get out of meetings that I don't need to be in. So this is really interesting. My manager has enacted any meeting that he has is voluntary, but I've yet to see anyone execute on that. So in concept, it's really good, and I think in theory, like actually we have done that. Like if I had something where I was like, I just can't make it today, I'm not going to show up, and it wasn't a big problem. So that might be something to consider as having voluntary meetings, which is a really interesting concept. Yes, Skylar? Yeah, so the question was around how we maintain evergreen content. I'll actually get a little bit more into that soon, but it really depends on how we classify it on the site. So for example, our top 5 open source project management, the way way we published that was top 5 open source project management tools for 2014. So for something like that, we would tend to just publish a new one for 2015. Now, we have other ones that we didn't publish in that fashion that we have a cadence that we go in, whether it's every 6 or 9 months, and go in and kind of look at it again and refresh it. So we have it's not a public cadence, but we have a cadence on the back end that we do that. Cool. So, all right. So this is like how we GSD. This is how we get stuff done. This is an example of our daily heartbeat. So we get an email every day that tells us how the site performed the previous day. So Alex, who does our social media, works on this every day. So you can see in this example, these are the articles that published the previous day. These are the page views they got. This is the traffic sources that we have and where our referral traffic is coming, and then some other statistics around social media, kind of like follower growth, and then a running total of our monthly page views. This is really important because if we saw like a dip in something or saw some sort of anomaly, we could actually go in and maybe do some additional digging to see, hey, search traffic was down. Why was search traffic down? And it's really just kind of like a way for us to be like, maybe the overall site traffic was down. Why was that? Oh, it was Thanksgiving yesterday. Well, that kind of thing. And we are big fans, and we know that content is king. And so we gather content in a lot of different ways, and so I'm going to walk you through a little bit of our content strategy. So we kind of have weekly topics that we tend to focus on, and we feel like we have a pretty good pulse on what's happening in the open source community. So we know that anything from Linux to Docker would usually do really well on the site, and you just got to make a call on like what kind of spin we want to have on that. We have columns. So we have people that blog for us once a month, and they have a recurring column, and we work with them, and we have a schedule, and we have polite reminders, and we have unpolite reminders that say, hey, your stuff is due last week, where's it going on? And we're really usually friendly about it, but we've got kind of a sequence going there. So we have kind of weekly kind of column content. We have weekly news. So every Friday we have a weekly news roundup that we publish that goes out and hey, here's all the kind of what we think the best open source news that happened this week, and kind of give you a digest of that. And then another big thing we do is themed content. So every month we pick a different theme, and we put out a call for writers, and we ask people to contribute to that theme. I'm going to try. I've been traveling a lot, so I don't even know what the theme is this month, but I believe it's beginners in open source, like how did you get started in open source? And that one usually does really well. We get usually a lot of new writers for that because a lot of people have a story about how they got started with open source, and they have tips and tricks on how to make it better for the next round. And then we have our resource content, our evergreen content that we do. We were doing this once a month. Now we're trying to do it once a week. And it really just kind of depends on the topic, but we're trying to figure out things like top 5 open source alternatives to Gmail. And so things of that nature that we think would do really well in the open source community. So here's an example of us, I would say over the last year and a half to 2 years, our team has gotten a lot better at this. 2 years ago, we did not have a very robust content pipeline. I didn't even know what we were going to publish the next day. Like we're just kind of like, hey, can you write something right now? Like we need something written. Now we're taking the time. Right, we have some columns here that are some examples of some columns that people write, and then a little bit of a screenshot from late last year with our editorial calendar. So we actually publish our editorial calendar on the site, and we have everything mapped out for the rest of 2016. I think the only open slot we have is November, and we'll fill that up before we even get there. But we put those out there so that if there's companies or projects or people that want to contribute to that theme, they can kind of see what our editorial calendar is for the rest of the year. The other big thing that drives a lot of content is when we partner with conferences. So hopefully some of you read some of our amazing interviews with Scale speakers. I think there's maybe a couple folks in the room that might have been interviewed or contributed to this. So we basically look for some of the major and up-and-coming open source conferences that are out there. We work with the organizers. Our team basically looks at the speaker, the agenda. We select speakers and topics that we think our audience would be interested in, and then we kind of play matchmaker. So we have a great set of community moderators that will help us with interviews, but then we'll just get general folks in the open source community to say, I want to interview Joan O'Bacon for the community management stuff. And so we kind of play matchmaker, put them together, and we help them come up with questions, or they come up with their own questions, and we review their questions to make sure that we're getting in the right direction. and then our team helps manage that entire process. So I think we have 18 scales, 18 interviews for scale, and then the URL at the bottom is where you can find all of that together. And then the other thing is important is that we do this like weeks ahead of the conference. So the whole goal is to create a win-win situation, actually a triple win. One, we want to help promote the conference. So we want to make sure people know about Scale and know about some of the topics that will be there. We want to promote the speaker and their talk so that if they have an opportunity to kind of say, hey, look, come to my talk, and here's why you should be at Scale. And then we get good content, and we help kind of grow people, the interviews that are happening, connect those with new people they may not have been networked with before. And then there's SEO. So if I'm kind of SEO, search engine optimization. I'm kind of an SEO geek. This stuff changes all the time, and we have a really fun story that got us interested in this. So May 2012, does anybody remember what happened in May 2012 in regards to Google? Panda update. Close, yeah. So opensource.com was negatively impacted by the Panda update. And I can tell you exactly on April 24th at 4 a.m. in the morning when our search traffic was slashed from about 1,200 hits a day to about 300 hits a day. And so we actually had no idea what was going on. We knew the Panda update went out, but we actually didn't think that's what happened until like a couple weeks later we started digging into our stats and figured out that it was in fact Panda. So this caused us to do an SEO audit, which was really fun. And fortunately for us, it was a really easy fix. So Drupal out of the box is just not really SEO friendly, or Drupal 6 out of the box was not SEO friendly. So this was 3 years ago. So we were able to go in and make some just really simple changes as from the structure of our pages, like really common stuff like H1, H2 title tags, and just kind of how the page was organized. And so we were able to make those corrections, and then finally we rebounded from that. But it was a pretty bad couple months where we were just like search traffic just drives so much of what we do. So lesson learned: if you're going to launch a website, make sure you're SEO friendly. So just let us take the hit for it. And then from an SEO perspective, right, our whole mantra has been write naturally. We're not doing any keyword stuffing at all. But we are conscious of, like, when we create titles, like if we're going after a certain keyword, you want to put your keyword on the right-hand side of the title and not on the left-hand side of the title because SEO will pick up those little nuances like that. So we've just kind of like learned little tips and tricks that have helped us be more efficient at creating good content that is searchable and findable. And then I mentioned earlier our friend Alex does a lot of social media, but he also does a lot of content distribution. So we know that we spend about half of our time preparing and planning for content, when we spend the other half of our time distributing the content. So we're not the New York Times, so we can just publish something and then everyone will read it. So we actually have to take time and put it out on social media and go to other websites like Slashdot and Hacker News and post things. Now, we don't take the shotgun approach, right? We're not like, hey, put everything everywhere. We are very conscious of, we think this article would do well in Slashdot. We're going to take the time to write it up and submit it, and hopefully it will get picked up. And we've gotten really good at that. The other thing that we do is we have a weekly email newsletter. It goes out to about 200,000 subscribers. And our strategy there is, like, we like to give our readers what we think they want. So we have a pretty good idea of our email audience. And in fact, every Tuesday in that 30, 60, 90 meeting, the first thing we do is we go over the email that we send out. And we look at the order that we put things in, and we look at the stats coming back, and we take time to learn iteratively every week how our email performed and what we could have done better. And we don't put every piece of content in there. We put, I think we've got only 10 articles that we put in each newsletter. And if we're publishing 20 a week, that means 10 of them aren't getting in. So we're big fans of give our audience what we think they want so that they keep coming back and keep reading. The other thing I'll mention, we'll get to here, social media. It's not a shotgun approach. I remember when we first started, we would just like get an article, publish it, and then send it everywhere, and then we're like wipe our hands. We're like, yes, we got it out there. We're done. That's not how it works, right? So, and we have different strategies for each kind of different piece of social media, right? So we have a different strategy for Twitter, different strategy for Facebook, and in fact, our Facebook and Google Plus strategy is very similar, just because of how they work. And then So just to give you an example for Twitter, we are not, like, we will tweet an article twice a day. When it first comes out, our strategy is we have kind of a window of time between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. Eastern time. We will send out all the new content. So we'll leave some space open for that, and then we'll redo the maybe not the same exact tweet, but a very similar tweet later on between 9 and 11 p.m. So we're trying to play the time zone game. And then what we'll do, since that content is fresh, we will take the time and create tweets and then schedule those out for the next 3, 4, 5 weeks. So we schedule a lot of our content. So if you were to, so we'll just take a new article that just published today. It'll go out at 9:07 a.m. and then it'll go out at 10:11 p.m. and then we'll create additional 4 to 5 tweets over the next few weeks to do that. So it's not just a one and done. We are trying to figure out how we can, the lifespan of an article is probably 2 to 3 weeks. So we're trying to figure out how we can maximize the lifespan of that article with social media. Yeah. Yeah, so the question is, are the tweets identical? And they are not. We'll reuse some of them, but for the most part, we're writing different versions of them. Exactly. So we're highlighting different aspects of the article. We're doing like maybe a pull quote from the article. We're doing things like tagging the person. Although this isn't like a social media tutorial, I have a lot of experience, and I'm happy to talk about it. We will take the time to look up the author. We will take the time to look up the organization that they work for and include those type of things in the tweet, because we know from experience that you have a higher chance of getting retweeted and liked if you include other handles like that. And then imagery is really great. So if you include images in tweets, you have like a 30% higher chance of getting it shared more. So the reason why we make things unique is because, we'll just make it unique by a few words, right? Or we'll just kind of do, hey, this sentence in the article is really good. We'll pull that out. We tend to do that all up front so that we don't have to go back and then reread the article and then figure out, oh, what was the really good thing about that? So because we have it right then and there, we're just kind of taking care of it all up front. You have another question? Yeah, so the question is about syndication. Yeah, so our preferred license is Creative Commons BYSA 4.0. So anyone that publishes on opensource.com is free to repurpose and republish their content elsewhere. The question is around, do many authors do that? And so I guess it really just depends on who it is. Some people, for example, my buddy Chris, who used to work at Twitter, actually came to us a few weeks ago and said, hey, I've got this great article, and he was really eager to publish it on his blog first, but he knew that he could probably get a bigger splash by having it on opensource.com first because of our reach and our audience. So he was patient and he waited, and we were able to accelerate the process for him. So if you're friendly with us, we can maybe pull some strings. So we published it on our site first, and then he published it on his site later on that day. But it was more about kind of creating the splash and getting the effect, the ripple effect of our audience and our distribution. But a lot of folks will actually take, if they're publishing on opensource.com, they'll take that and add that to their personal WordPress or whatever to kind of keep their portfolio up to date. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's interesting. However, the big piece is Google or your favorite search engine will typically know the original source, right? So we're kind of more designed for, because you'll see later, over half our traffic comes from search. So we're more concerned with that than people's preferred, should I go to Joe's blog or should I go to opensource.com? So I think it's just really personal preference. So okay, well, let's keep going, and then we can get to some more questions later. Where was I at? Cool. So I want to talk about some of the programs that we've done that have really helped to do some community building on the site and have really helped us establish where we are today. And so this is a view of kind of like my view of how we look at our community. So at the baseline, right, we've got a great group of readers and people who share and people who comment and people just kind of who have some like um, you know, minor to no interactions, right? You know, if they're reading, it's really hard for us to tell if they're reading other than a page view. And then we get someone that will just write for us one time, and that's great. We like having new stories. We like having people, new people on the site. But from a management perspective, and again, we're managing volunteers here, so we can't like tell someone they have to do something. It's kind of just kind of being being there with open arms and being very welcoming and helping them get through the process. Just like if you were in sales, right, it's easier to sell to an existing customer than it is to go get a new customer. So my team tends to spend a lot of time on the upper part of this triangle where we tend to work more with people who are repeat writers or columnists or our community moderators, which I'll talk about in a moment. And so we anyone who writes for us, we invite them to our writers list. So I think we've got that to about 250 subscribers. So it's just a mailman email list, and we send out an update probably once every 1 to 2 weeks or so with just different writing opportunities. Hey, February's coming up. Our theme is this. We're partnered with X event, and we are looking for people to help us interview. Blah blah blah. And so we just kind of provide that, that nudge and that reminder. Right? It's always nice to be reminded of things that are happening, that there are opportunities to write. And then the thing that we spend a lot of our time with is our community moderators. So we launched this program about 3 years ago with 4 people, and we've grown it to I think we're at 18. Yeah, 18. And so this right here, like this is the foundation of our community. These are folks from all over the world. They're all volunteers. They've all basically committed to being a community moderator for a year. And then we have some other parameters around that. I'm not going to go through the full details because we've got that all listed on the website. Our community moderators contribute anywhere between 20 and 30% of our content each month, which is a pretty significant amount. A lot of these folks are helping us with the weekly news. They have different expertise that they're working on. In fact, I think 2 of our moderators are here at the conference. We've got Jono in the your upper left, and then Deb Nicholson is here as well. So these are folks that are involved in open source and help us with they're kind of our eyes and ears around the world on what's going on, and they give us a lot of feedback and they give us a lot of direction, and they're a really great group of folks to work with. The other thing I'll mention here from a community perspective is that we have a points and badge system on the site, so we have a mechanism for people to kind of show and earn reputation. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And then every year during our anniversary, we decided that we didn't want to pat ourselves on the back and say, hey, we made it a year. And the story I like to tell here is when my son turned a year old, we had a birthday party for him. Except it really wasn't for him because he's 1 and he has like a lot of friends. It was really for my wife and I. Hey, we made it a year. It was a milestone. We had like burgers and stuff on the grill, and they had a keg, and it was awesome. So we were celebrating the fact that we made it as parents. It wasn't about the fact that my son was a year old. So we did the same thing on opensource.com. I was like, hey, we made it a year. Well, let's celebrate. But let's celebrate our community, and let's take a moment to thank our community because they're the ones that have really made this happen. And so we give out community awards every year. In fact, right now we have voting for our People's Choice Award open until I think mid next week. So we go through and we look for some of the top folks that are contributing to open source, and we allow our community to vote on the folks that they think are deserving of that award. And really, with this, the community moderator program, we are trying to create a win-win, right? So, I asked a lot of our community moderators, why are you doing this? Like, why are you contributing? And a lot of it's because they get to meet really amazing people in open source, and they get to build their own reputation. So we've created a platform for them to help them become a better writer, and they're making a name for themselves. And so it's a win-win. We get good content, and they're building their portfolio, and they're building their brand. The other thing that's a little bit important is that we actually bring all of our moderators to Raleigh, where we're based out of Raleigh, North Carolina, every October. We have an in-person meeting with them. So Red Hat picks up their airfare and their hotel, and we take care of most of their food and transportation. And we have a full day together, and nothing nothing beats an in-person meeting with your community. I mean, it's just absolutely amazing to get everyone together who some people have never met before in real life, and just kind of see that magic happen when they meet each other for the first time, or they're seeing each other again because they came last year. And we sit down and we have we call it an open source agenda. We create an agenda and we say, hey, this is what we think we should talk about, but if you want to talk about something else, just let us know. We can modify it on the fly. And we have some great conversations. We have some great ideas that they bring. And then we get them a pass to the All Things Open conference, which happens in October, and then we let them go to the conference and network and do whatever they want. And so we kind of just say, hey, we'd love for you to come. We're going to pick up all your travel, hang out with us for a day, and then you get 2 days at the conference. And it really is amazing when that happens every year. It's one of the highlights of the year for me. I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier about this, but just to kind of give you some examples, these are some past winners of our People's Choice Award. Again, this voting goes out to my team makes a short list, and we put it out to community for final voting. And then this is actually an example of our point level system on the site. We actually had to add star because we had so many people. I didn't think people would hit 5,000, so we had to modify that to make sure that everyone was getting more points. And we actually have another level after this. So, question. Yes, there is a level called Superstar right now that is 25,000 plus, and if we have to go beyond that, then we have to come up with some more constellation or space names. I thought Open Sorcerer was going to be it. I really like that one. We came up with that name, and I thought it was the top achievement. So, yeah. So the question is, where are the moderators? Are we targeting anything, anywhere in specific? So because they're volunteers, we kind of take what we can get. But they are all over the world. We have folks in, I'm going to try to, I don't know where everyone is off the top of my head, but Netherlands, New Zealand, India, Canada, all over North America. So right now we're kind of trying to expand our efforts to some of the other parts of the world outside of North America. So looking at the statistics, over half of our traffic comes from North America, but then we're seeing other emerging places. I'd love to get a moderator in South America because we know, you may not know, Brazil is a great hotbed of open source, and there's a lot of activity happening in Brazil. And if we could get someone from Brazil to be a moderator, that would be amazing. So we're looking for those people, but it is a commitment. It's a year-long commitment, and we ask people to write 1 to 2 times a month for us. So there's a slight commitment there. Yeah. Yeah, so the question is, if we are targeting more international, what language are we using? So right now we're English only. There are just, for us, because we're a small team, challenges with translation. So if we do we do have volunteers that will translate articles randomly, and if that does happen, we do link to that translation once we verify that it looks good. So that's just kind of a kind of time, money, resources thing that we decided English only, that's what we can do now. Cool. All right. Well, let's go down the path, and I'm going to share some of the tools that we're using every day. Again, hopefully that you can take some of these ideas and take it back to your teams, or see a tool that you haven't used before. And this is going to be really fun because this is how we actually GSD. So this is a list of the majority of the tools that we use. I'm going to go in depth on most of the ones on the left, but to kind of quickly walk through. Sprout Social and Hootsuite are social media tools that we use for our scheduling and reporting. We use a combination of both. Right now, we use Sprout Social a little bit more because you can do scheduling down to the minute, where Hootsuite restricts you to schedule in increments of every 5 minutes, so you can only do on the hour, 5, 10, 15, etc. Sprout has some really good reporting mechanisms that we use, and there's something else about Sprout I want to mention. And it actually has a really good kind of robust multi-scheduling interface. So you asked if we do the same tweet when we schedule things, we do the same tweet, but then we go in and modify it. They have a system that goes in, and you can pick multiple days and multiple times, and it makes it really easy to schedule. We do a lot of email. I have a lot of email, and that's just kind of how we interact with our moderators and how we communicate with a lot of folks. We have a special mailing list set up just for our moderators, and that's one of the main ways that we communicate with them. And then we have an IRC channel, and of course we use a lot of the different social media components. The only thing I won't talk about in the other column is Eloqua, just because it's not really sexy. Eloqua is just our email newsletter system, so it's just kind of like MailChimp, right? You have a template, we drop our content in, it sends it out at the time we want to send it out. We actually have a whole team at Red Hat that manages that for us. So we basically just kind of create the HTML, hand it off to them, and then they send the rest of it. So it's really kind of cool to have those type of resources for us. I kind of mentioned this before, but just to kind of walk through, we use Drupal as our content management system. We've partnered with Acquia to do our hosting, so they're kind of, they know a lot about Drupal. Dries, who created Drupal, works for them, created the company. So we use that for all of our kind of back-end stuff. This is a tool called Adobe Analytics, or also known as Omniture. So this is basically our Google Analytics. The only reason we really use Adobe Analytics is because that's what Red Hat uses, so we kind of are using the existing resources that we have at the company. Again, it does like all your standard page views, unique visits, and it probably has a lot of other features that I haven't even drilled down to yet. So I have a lot of other people that are really smart about this, so I don't have to worry about it too much. We use a lot of Etherpads. So Etherpads I like to describe as kind of a lightweight Google Doc. The benefits here is that you can have multiple people collaborating in a document at one time. So our primary uses for this are meeting notes. So if we're in a meeting, we usually have a weekly, any of our weekly meetings we start up with an Etherpad. Any documentation that we're starting, we start in Etherpad and then we move it to another system because we want to have a way for multiple people to contribute to that document and when it's kind of in that incubation stage. Speaking of that, so this is it's internally called Mojo, but it's a tool from Jive Software, and I'm blanking on the actual name of it right now. So. Because it had like 5 different names. But anyway, it's kind of this wiki blog kind of combination of things that we use internally at Red Hat. And so what we'll usually do is we'll document something in Etherpad, and once we get it to a good place, we'll move it to Mojo, where we kind of harden it, and that's kind of where our content repository is. And the biggest thing I'll preach here is that we document everything on my team. And I know a lot of people kind of maybe feel some pain around that, but you can kind of just see through some of the examples, like our 30, 60, 90 is in here, but we document how do you send out the weekly newsletter, because if Alex is sick one day, I don't want to go figure out and contact 5 people to figure out how to do the newsletter. I've got a 12-step process written down where I know exactly what we need to do, right? So it's not really about, for me and my team, it's not really about what you know how to do. We're going to write that down. It's really about what your creativeness is and what you can do to help us build and do new things. Yeah? We do not document how we document. It is me going, you should put that on Mojo. Actually, we kind of do. We actually, in our 30, 60, 90, we actually add that as part of our goal. So we say, document this process. So it usually starts off with, if it's something new, like, hey, we got to figure it out, but within 2 to 3 weeks, like, I'm a big fan of, like, we need to write that down, it needs to be in Mojo, and we need to make sure that we have a very clear way of doing this. And so I would say we probably have about 80 to 85% of all the things that we do on a daily basis documented. So we're not perfect, but I'm a big stickler for it, and my team actually really appreciates it, even though it is a grind to get it done. They're like, man, I'm glad we did that. As a great example, when we sat down in December to start planning for our community awards, Jen had taken the time last year and documented the entire process. And we're like, man, we got to figure this thing out. And we pulled up this document. We're like, dude, you already did all the work. Like, we had dates planned out. We had links to all the old stuff. And it was just like, it was such a time saver. And we had a 2-hour meeting plan, and it took us 30 minutes. So it was amazing. So documents really saved us. And it's really saved us a couple other instances, too. All right, I got to finish up here. So we also use Google Docs. EtherCalc just really doesn't cut it for us. So our preference is to use open source tools when we can, but we have a lot of kind of complicated spreadsheets that we use. This is an example of our statistics spreadsheet. So Omniture is great, or Adobe Analytics is great when we need to go in and get real-time stuff and do it on the fly. But going in and looking at what happened the previous month and what happened the month before that, we've just kind of put this here so we can have a really kind of a dashboard view of our traffic and what's happening, and search traffic, referral traffic. You can see this is we actually don't have a great way to track like the number of unique contributors to the site, so it's a manual count. Hey, we go through every month and we figure out, hey, we had 90 articles. Out of that 90, 60 of them were repeat, and 20 of them were for community moderators, and we calculate it all right here. So that's really fun. For SEO, we use a tool called Moz. Moz is a third-party tool that comes in and crawls our site once a week and gives us feedback on keyword rankings. It's $99 a month for their subscription, but it's really great because it is a third-party tool. So if you go to your favorite open source search engine or Google, a lot of that stuff is customized based on your previous visits and your profile. So we need this third-party tool to tell us what kind of our base ranking is for all of these keywords. Oh no! I had a new slide in there that didn't show up. Okay, maybe I didn't put it in there. So sorry about that. We also use Trello. We just started doing this about 3 weeks ago. I have a screenshot somewhere that didn't make it into the presentation. But for our publication process and our publication pipeline, we were using the Google Doc, and we were kind of cutting and pasting rows and moving them around, and that was getting tedious because our volume is increasing. So we set up a Trello board, and we have a whole workflow of what it looks like. Actually, you know what? Let me exit the presentation momentarily and dangerously show you on the fly what this might look like, except it's not on the screen. Exactly. Where did that go? Let's see. Is that it? Does that look like a Trello board? Nope, that's a waffle board. This is my personal waffle board. This is how I get stuff done every day. So if I have something in email and I want to get out of my inbox, I make a card on waffle and I drop it in here, and this is all tied back on GitHub. So that's always nice. Let's see here. Why isn't this not going over? All right, that's going to fail. So I'll try to do that later. Is that my terminal window? I can't see what's on the screen. Okay, that's my GitHub commit. Okay, great. Okay, let's talk about some results really quick, and then I don't want to stand between you, dinner, and the weakest geek thing. So, all right, so I mentioned earlier when we do our GSD stuff, like we measure everything. So actually when we do our 30, 60, 90, I forgot to mention we use SMART goals. And I cannot remember what the acronym stands for right now, so you can Google that. But basically what it means for us is that we have a specific goal that we're trying to accomplish. Somebody is assigned to it as a specific date, right? So we want to make sure that we're going to do a goal. We know that it's 2 weeks away, 3 weeks away, a month away, and that somebody owns it. So that's really important to us. Other things that we really care about, we care about how many contributions are coming from the community. And so 60% of all the content we publish on opensource.com comes from someone who doesn't work at Red Hat. And I'm actually really proud of that. I'd like it to be closer to 70, but I'm happy with 60% because we're over the halfway mark, and it just shows that we are a community blog and we are a collection of the community. I alluded to this earlier, but this is a kind of a capture of last quarter's incoming traffic. So you can see over half of our traffic is coming from search, which is why we are so attuned to that. And then you see that we have about 10 to 15% of our traffic is coming from social media. So the time that we're spending on social media is actually paying off, so we're actually really happy with that number. And so this is a breakdown of our traffic. Here's an example of our keywords from Moz. So this is a really interesting story. A couple years ago, when you could actually see some of the keywords coming in before Google blocked it on you, we saw that people were typing in the words open source. They were coming to opensource.com, and then they were leaving. In web terms, or in marketing web term statistics, we call that a bounce rate. So we're like, man, we have a ton of open source content. Why are they leaving? So we figured out, I don't know how we figured it out, but we figured out eventually that they were looking for a definition of open source. And so once we actually wrote that page, we wrote a what is open source page, we saw our bounce rate decrease. Yeah, we went down. And then we started seeing traffic go to that. So again, Skylar asked us earlier, like, how often do we update it? We update it in the beginning. We try to update things every 6 months, and then we kind of have a normal check-in point. So we took another iteration of that 6 months later and made some improvements to it based on some other things that we were seeing through our statistics, and we saw even more traffic coming to it. So we created this What is Open Source page, and we're getting a baseline of 25,000 pages a month to that. So that's just people typing in open source, seeing that we actually beat out Wikipedia for that. So if you type in what is open source, your results may vary, but we have the #1 spot for that for the last 2 years. So don't go try to take that page away from me, because we're really proud of that. But again, that's just, we provided a definition that we think, I like to describe it as a plain English version of what open source is, right? We try to avoid some of the legal jargon, right? I used to describe open source, there's this great thing called the GPL, and I'd get all these like deer in the headlight looks at me. So we try to really make it really simple and really plain English, and it's paid off for us. And then also mentioned, that our SEO audit paid off. So we eventually rebounded from the Panda update, and we're seeing some great results from search. And basically our strategy now is to figure out, is there some keywords that we can go after? Is there a topic that we have some source matter expertise in, and write some content for it and watch it if we get any reaction, if we get any results from it? We typically, in our experience, there's a 3 to 6 month delay from when you start publishing a piece of content around a certain topic before you actually start seeing your ranks climb up. So, we could do something we're not even in the top 50. 3 months later, we might crack the top 50. 6 months later, we're lucky we've cracked the top 10. It really depends on the content. If people are searching for it, the search volume, and all those things. I could geek out about SEO for a while, but I'm going to stop there. This is our traffic for the last, 2012, so the last 4 years. A lot of people at Red Hat like charts that are up and to the right, particularly our CFO. That was a bad financial joke. But you can see... True, yeah. So you can see our traffic's been growing over the last couple of years here. We don't quite have that hockey stick curve here quite yet, but it could be getting there soon. We had a record in December of 820,000 page views, which we were kind of surprised with, because usually December is kind of a down month because a lot of people are distracted with the holidays. Why would people be distracted with the holidays? But what we found out is people were not distracted with the holidays, and they actually were tuning in because maybe they were frustrated with the holidays. I don't know the reason. We had a fabulous month. We continued to publish throughout December, and we had a great reaction to that. There you go. Well, fingers crossed. So, all right. So just to wrap up really quick, and then we'll take some more questions. So for me, that slide with the community moderators, like that for us is really where it's at, right? Our community is everything to us, and we do not want to do anything that's going to hinder or violate or kind of have any sort of mistrust with the community that we're working with. We know that the person that we're working with now, maybe it's their first article, they could be our next moderator. So creating a good experience for them is really important, making sure that they feel welcome, that they feel like they've got the resources they need to get their article published, and making sure that we're making it as easy as possible is great. And to speak to that, we don't have the restrictions of, like, if you want to get something published on the site, you have to put it in this format, and you have to do this, and you have to do that. Like, you could put it in Markdown, you can write a Google Doc, you could write a LibreOffice document. Like, we accept all forms of content because we want to make it as easy as possible for our contributors. And really, the other thing that I like to talk about here is to invest in programs that will invest in your community. So we made a conscious decision to invest in our community moderator program. We made a conscious decision to save some budget to fly them all in, whether they're from the Netherlands and India, which are really expensive flights to get to the U.S., to the the $200 flight to get someone from Maryland. We've taken some time and saved that budget to bring our community together because we know how important it is. So again, investing in programs like that will invest in our community, and we're seeing some amazing results with that. So I think we are fulfilling our mission of creating the world's premier open source storytelling platform. We've got executive support at Red Hat, so Jim Whitehurst is a big fan. We take that daily report, and I didn't mention this earlier, we roll it up to a weekly report, and then we roll it up to a monthly report, and we publish that monthly report on the site, so we're very open source about that. We send the monthly report to our CEO, Jim Whitehurst, and every month his response for the last few months has been, when are we hitting 1 million page views? So he's paying attention, which is awesome. And then what I'll do here is just kind of wrap up with some lessons learned from the past 2 to 3 years that we've been doing this, right? So again, content is king. We've developed our content strategy. We have some really interesting ways that we're getting content and getting new users and getting repeat writers for us. Told you the whole SEO story, but again, make sure your any sort of publication or website that you're doing has some good SEO and that your structures are correct. With our community moderator program, it's really kind of identifying the stars in your community. I don't like to use the term rock star, so identifying the achievers in your community and like pointing them in the right direction and making sure that they have the stuff that they need to be successful. So again, they're volunteers. I work for them, and I try to help them out. We've gotten a lot of feedback that our site is really simple. We're ad-free because Red Hat supports the site, and so we don't have to worry about even though we're measured by page views, we don't have to worry about banner click-throughs and some of those other kind of statistics a lot of other publications are really driven on. So keeping things really simple. We actually are in the process of doing a redesign, so hopefully you'll see the fruition of that here in the next few weeks. And then again, practice lean, having feedback loops, measuring what success looks like, and being able to kind of make that quick iterative process move along. So. I will end with one of the things I really like to say is that again, I hope this improves your everyday work, but for the community stuff, right? I think it's really important to define your community so that you can build your community, so that you can nurture it, right? And that nurturing is with programs and investment and different tools. And then I've got this really fun quote that I like to use from a lady called Margaret Mead. And she says, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed people could change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And so we've got a great community. Again, we only have 18 community moderators, and they are amazing to work with and doing some amazing things. And so I'll end there, and thank you for your time, and I hope that you can take what you learned today and change the world even better with open source. So thank you. I'm really hard to find on the internet, so there's all the places you can find me. My slides are on GitHub. You saw the commit on that earlier, and if you're interested in the book, there's a link to the book on there as well. So, questions? Yeah. Yeah. So the question is, who is our biggest competitor? It's really interesting because when we started this project 6 years ago, we were looking for people who did this, and nobody does it. And to my knowledge, nobody does this currently. There's a couple other blogs that kind of do some of this. Black Duck was running a blog called Open Source Matters, and they were kind of similar, but I don't think they had the community piece of it. And that's not a bad thing. It's just that's not what they were working for. And I mean, I wouldn't say that they're competition, but I mean, the Linux Foundation does some very similar stuff. So I mean, I really don't view them as competition. I view them as more of a partner. So we can share content and we can work with them to do some cool stuff. So Black Duck, yeah, their blog, if it's still going, is Open Source Matters. But yeah, we couldn't find anything that's like, oh man, that's our rival. Like, we don't have a rival, which is kind of nice. I like to be friendly with everyone that we can be. Other questions? Yeah. Yeah, no, we go into December thinking that it's going to be a down month because of the holidays, but actually you can see, I think from the last 2 years, December, or maybe 3 years, December has been really good for us. So it was just way better than we expected last month. Oh, and then I don't know if I can do this. You can see May 2012 is when we started recovering. So I guess August. No, May 2012 is when we got hit, and February 2013 is when we started recovering from the Google Panda update. And then there's a couple other things that happened in that kind of sequence. So that's we also launched our community moderator program, and that's when a lot of our fixes went out for the Google Panda, and we got accepted to Google News, which was kind of a triple good whammy for us of like, all right, now we're ready to kind of take this to the next level. So you can see that dark period there of losing search traffic, and some of that was actually covered up by some really good syndication efforts. So like in April when it happened, we got slash dotted, so we got a little bit of boost there. So it kind of covered up some of the raw numbers once we dug into it. We figured out what happened. You had another question? So the question is about how many articles we reject, and then do we reject anything from competition, Red Hat competition. So I'm not kind of in the weeds on that right now, but I would say we get a lot of spammy stuff, that like content farm, that we usually don't even respond to because we're getting pretty savvy about like, that's just a content farm, no interest. I would say over the last year, we have definitely increased the quality of the content, so we probably are rejecting a little bit more than we would have before. But we don't just reject with a, no, we're not going to publish this. We reject with a, no, we're not going to publish this, but if you want to go in this direction, we're happy to work with you on that. So it's not just a, hey, talk to the hand kind of rejection. Like, we want to be friendly with folks, and we want to make sure that if there's a good story, we can get out of it.